All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. So good to be here. The first chart in any of my presentations is the most important one because it has all my contact information there. So anything's fair game. Many conferences I speak at, some of the best ideas for future stuff that we end up doing comes from questions and problems that the audience is trying to resolve. So I welcome that kind of interaction. So let's talk about the API economy, and I apologize ahead of time for the charts. That was why it was the holdup outside. They could not figure out the resolution, so there's a little bit of verbiage that didn't quite come on the screen here, but we'll make do. So we talk about the API economy, and it really is there an app for that generation? Everybody, when they have a problem, the first thing they think of now is there an app for that? It really is. And if you've got to respond to that cultural behavior, if you want a service that you're coming out with, you have to respond to that, because if you do not respond to that behavior, somebody else will. And so there are very, on this chart, things that are kind of the classic buzzwords here, things like DevOps, mobile first, engaging user experience, cloud scale. But these APIs and frameworks are really the way you unlock all those things. If you do not have an API in place that is inviting new consumers of the service into the cloud and doesn't give you a way of cultivating community, I thought it was a great point that Devine had in the other presentation. He said, the way you know that your service is a success is if somebody extends it in a valuable way that you never anticipated, and it's by someone that you never knew, right? And that's true for the cloud too. I think many times when we come out with a cloud-based service, we really do not fully understand what we're delivering until we start cultivating that feedback. And so let's go through some of this. If I can get this to work. All right, so some really good quotes that I like here. First one's from Albert Einstein. If you always do the same thing that you did, then you always get what you got, all right? That's the definition of insanity, all right? And unfortunately, many of our IT shops, that's what they were doing for years. They were doing things over and over again the same way. And one of the things that really kind of caused a revolt of the development community was the speed, the need for speed. Really, you had to rethink how you did things. There was another really good line in the keynote that said that APIs enable you to create services that ordinarily would not have been created. And that's very true. If you follow the same processes that you always did, you're never going to be able to create new things. And you have to be able to make mistakes. This is a famous quote by Thomas Edison. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, just be afraid of not learning from them. And really, one of the things that kind of revolutionized the industry here in terms of technology and really kind of birthed cloud computing was Agile Development. Those Agile developers, they knew that they needed to make a mistake, learn from that mistake, incorporate that learning, and then make the process better. And so that's really where cloud computing was born, through those APIs and through that DevOps process. And this is a good quote that I like from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It says, "Do not go where the path may lead you. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." And that trail is your API. When you go and you branch out and do something new, creating an API gives others a path to that service and gives them an opportunity to extend that service. And then the last quote that I have here is from Gandhi. It says, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they win." So many times when you start to do something new in your enterprise, you get all kinds of pushback. I know I work for a very large company, one of the largest companies on the planet, and I've always been kind of a rogue employee in some regards. Because I'm very easily bored, so I like to do things that are new and kind of out on the fringe. And I always, the first time I go in to see one of the senior vice presidents, they always hate my idea. Okay? The second time I go in there, they're willing to listen to me and they think, well, there might be something here. The third time, they're sort of interested but they're not sure. The fourth time they invite me to come back in and want us to move forward. You have to have that passion. You have to have that drive that keeps you moving. When you create an API, you've got to love that API. You have to make others love that API. It was really a good point in the keynote. You have to have that evangelistic, because you have to reach a point, a tipping point, where you get enough usage and you get enough value of that usage that you start turning consumers into evangelists for that service. And it's all built around this need for speed. You cannot create everything yourself. You have to be able to respond to the changes, the dynamics of the consumer population that wants to consume your service, of the developer population, and you have to move very, very quickly. If you're trying to build everything yourself through processes that existed 10, 15 years ago, you're going to fail. Two guys without a garage aren't going to be able to take you out from a competitive standpoint, all right? And so we came up with this, this strategy a couple years ago when I was in corporate strategy called Cloudfirst. You build a service on the cloud for the cloud first. And the reason why you do that is you can immediately, by way of an API, make that service available to a brand new set of users, some of which you may have not even had any previous contact with. And the feedback that you get from those users, you can get valuable information. You can realize that, wow, I didn't quite get this right. This service isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. The feedback that I'm getting is tending negative because of X, Y, Z. It gives you a chance to reshape that. It also gets you a chance that says, wow, I never thought that they were going to use this service in this way. This is where I need to build additional value. So it's extremely valuable. I remember in the old days, you would do product development for a year and a half, 2 years, and then you would spring it on the audience at the end, and then sometimes it went over like a lead balloon because you kind of missed the mark. Other times, maybe you were successful with what you were trying to do, but you could have been so much more successful if you'd gotten that feedback and incorporated that feedback. And so it's very important, especially as you try to balance some of the important things like DevOps, mobile, being able to do things around big data in real time, is you've got to be able to do APIs. You can't store all the data you need. I remember in the old days, you used to bring everything into a data warehouse, all right? And had everything in one place, and that's how you do the data. You can't do that anymore. There's too much valuable data everywhere that you need to be able to incorporate into your business services. And so if you look at like the API growth, you just see that it's completely skyrocketing. And again, simplicity wins. Developers want things fast. They want things easy. All right? If you make people have to work for the value you're trying to give them, they'll just go somewhere else. There's another app for that that's going to be better. They're going to go use it. You have both private, partner, and public. This came out in Oren's presentation as well. You have to be able to take advantage of all three of those aspects. There are things that you can innovate internally through internal APIs. There's ways that you can innovate externally with your partners. And then you also want to be able to, what I call cloud source, be able to get to a broad world of developers, some of which you don't even know. They can extend your value proposition and become evangelists for your service. And this is all really being driven by the explosion of mobile. There are so many devices now. And it's just not, when I talk about mobile, I'm just not talking about smartphones and tablets. Embedded devices, digital devices that are everywhere, personal wearable devices. It was very interesting at the, and I'll talk about it a little later, the Intel Developer Forum that I was at, talking about personals and wearables, all right? And that's where we're going, being able to ensure that you have constant connectivity and you have a way of getting to constant information. And so it is kind of a perfect storm, being able to tap into that social aspect, being able to ensure that you can take advantage of things like location-based protocols. You have to be able to incorporate that mobility. You have to be able to incorporate the change in the culture. If you don't tap into that change in the culture, you're going to be outdated. And there's classic examples of this. I mean, the people that, own the railroads, they ignored the planes, right? The people that had, VHS, rentals, ignored the web and rentals coming across the web and streaming movies. when you see cultural changes, you have to be able to react to that, and you have to have the right APIs in place so that you can tap into those sets of users whose behavior may change, that may cause you to have to reshape how you're doing your business. Because if you don't do that reshaping, you're not going to reshape the culture. All right? And so let's talk about mobile first. So IBM has a really big mobile first initiative. And just like Cloudfirst, when you build on the cloud for the cloud first, mobile first is that you are looking out for the mobile consumer. You know that you've got to address the fact that everybody's walking around with smartphones and tablets, and they're always connected. How is your service that you're delivering going to be consumable through those applications and through those devices? And so there's a really nice linkage here. I did a blog recently. It was called Mobile First, Cloud First. Which came first? It's sort of like the chicken and the egg. And my assertion in my blog was that they are absolutely inseparable, all right? Because you cannot do all services at the mobile edge, and you also can't ignore the mobile edge and do all the services back on the cloud. You have to have this tight interaction between the two. It's absolutely critical for you to be able to engage that mobile user and engage those mobile application developers as part of your services. You also need to have these strong back-end services as well. Now, a really interesting thing's happening here is I remember the dot-com era. Yes, I'm that old, okay? So, in the dot-com era, you had all of my colleagues, a lot of them were going out and creating very innovative companies. But what ended up happening was that as they scaled, they got burdened down by all the IT that they had to do. And they could no longer be innovative, all right? And one of the things that the cloud has given us the ability to do is by way of the simple APIs that the cloud makes available, developers can innovate, and they can focus on that innovation. They no longer have to focus on the underlying IT because the cloud provider provides that, all right? And this convergence of these trends like mobile and social and cloud, big data and analytics, the commercialization of IT, bringing those things together, that's the blog that I was talking about there. You can go out there and find it. You do a Google on my name, or you can write down the URL. But this has not gone unnoticed by the VCs. The venture capitalists now realize that they're not going to fund a new company and put in the funding their ability to build a data center and set up the IT. They're going to assume that they're going to use the APIs of a cloud or cloud providers and do that. They also assume that they're going to have some kind of mobile presence as well, right? And so if you come to a VC and you don't have a solid API of a way of engaging the mobile users, the mobile applications, and you don't have a way of delivering that through a cloud-based service, you're probably not going to get any money. And with those more and more developers are challenging, but they also give you a good opportunity as well. When you move from a traditional waterfall development model to an agile development model, the developer is very autonomous. He or she can pick whatever language they want. They can pick whatever kind of framework they want. And so, as an example, if you come out with a service and you only make it available for an API that's very attractive to, say, Java developers, you're going to miss 3/4 of the population that you could potentially go after, right? And in fact, one of the speakers was talking about, they came out with iPhone and somebody else in the community came out with the Android version of that, right? So you want to be able to foster those kinds of things. You want to be able to smartly invest where you need to, but you need to be able to look at the entire population. If you just look at kind of the demographic in 2002, 40% of development was outside of the core IT. 60% was still in core IT in large enterprises. And that trend is going to continue where more and more of the development is pushed out to the edge. More and more of the development is at the line of business. More and more development is going to be cloud sourced. I'm going to create new things that I didn't even envision because I'm going to make an API available to the information and data that I have. That's where we're headed. And so this aspect of data, information, This is the, we've been in the information age for a while, but it's kind of went up to another notch now, because by giving APIs to information, I start facilitating business by access to that information. So one of the panelists was talking about, the running, the exercise app, and all the information about, the activities. And that spawns somebody else to have an idea. So this aspect of innovation around, wow, if I can get to this location-based information that somebody else has already gone to the trouble of harvesting, now I can tap into that and I can provide value. I don't have to replicate harvesting that information myself. All right? And so that's really what's different here, is the cloud is kind of, we believe, is kind of central to the delivery of all the things to mobile, all the social interaction, things that are happening around interaction around game theory and analytics, video and UC. We see the cloud and the APIs to those services of the cloud being central to provide that data so that people can do innovative things with it. Also, the APIs have kind of become the new business interaction point. The first, I go back to what I was saying before, this is there an app for that generation? All right? The first thing, when I'm thinking about, I wish there was a service that did the following. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look for a service. I'm going to go look for an app. I'm going to look for an API to a service. Used to be, I would start building something from scratch. Now, my first inclination, is there a basic building block that I can go out and find? All right? And so that's the way you're going to start doing interactions internally and externally with your partners as well as your customers. It is really the new currency for the cloud ecosystem. And it also fuels that hyper growth that I was talking about, a scalable ecosystem. If you're trying to fight a battle all by yourself in the market, you're going to lose. You need to have consumers of your service become evangelists and bring others to it to make it better. If you don't have that thriving community ecosystem, then you're not going to be successful. And so being able to interact in new ways and get to data that was unobtainable before is absolutely critical for future business. And that innovation, if you can get it adopted by a community of developers that believe in the service, that believe in the value of that service, then that's the greatest marketing tool you can have. All right? There's an old saying that if you give somebody a fish, they can eat a meal. But if you teach somebody to fish, they can live for a lifetime. It's very similar to that, right? You can advertise your API all you want, but that only is going to be good for a certain period of time. If you have somebody that really truly starts believing in your API and starts building value around the API, and they get passionate about what they're building that value around, then they start evangelizing it and telling their friends through social media, and then it really takes off. All right? And so that's really going to be the key for hyper growth, is being able to fuel that scalable ecosystem. Now, I talked about the IDF earlier, the Intel Developer Forum. We had a booth, Softlayer, an IBM company, had a booth. We had the only live Internet of Things demonstration there at the conference. It was actually really a great conference, because I got to meet a lot of Intel developers in the Intel developer community, which is quite extensive. And they were really surprised that they could do the things that we were showing them, because they had kind of fallen into this trap that the cloud means compromise. You have to compromise performance. You have to compromise what you're doing. You can't customize things to a certain degree. You can't have predictable performance. You have to do whatever the cloud service provider gives you as a framework to do it. And really what we tried to do at Softlayer, and the reason why IBM acquired Softlayer, I worked on the Softlayer acquisition for a year. I started June 4th, 2012, and I closed the acquisition June 4th, 2013. In IBM speed, that's pretty fast. But basically, one of the things that attracted me to Softlayer was its APIs. Softlayer basically took a different approach. Their view of the world was, instead of me, the cloud service provider, telling you this is the only API I'm going to give you to do this. All right? They wanted to have the ability to give the developers many APIs. So they have almost 2,000 APIs that they have. And the reason why they do that is they listen to their ecosystem. If someone in their ecosystem says, wow, I sure wish I had a way of controlling this particular bare metal service, right? They create an easy REST-based API for that, all right? So you could highly customize and get down to the actual silicon if you wanted to. And so the Intel developers that were looking at being able to tap into things that were kind of all the way into the silicon found this very attractive because they could control things at a very granular level. Where, in the past, they do things on-prem, and they would be able to do it, on a dedicated environment. And, the revolution of virtualization came and things were kind of abstracted away. Now with a cloud service provider, it gives you the ability to get to bare metal with the same elasticity, consumability, and cost that you can get with virtual multi-tenant. It gives you that control back in terms of your performance. And so, Softlayer really focuses on providing you an infrastructure service and a whole set of APIs so that you can turn every knob, every switch that you want to customize that infrastructure just like you want it, whether that's a bare metal service or a virtual private service or a dedicated bare metal service or a dedicated private service or a virtual shared environment. And so we have lots of customers that bring their own virtualization to the Softlayer bare metal, and then they basically want the certain configuration that they had on-prem, but now they want it in the cloud. So it's sort of like, I tell people it's like the rental car reservation model. When I go to take a trip to Chicago, as an example, and I rent a compact, because that's what IBM makes me do, all right? Because I travel so much, when I show up, most of the time, a lot of the time, I get upgraded to a better car. Am I happy about that? Absolutely, I'm happy about that. Well, that's the same thing here. They capture whatever you're doing in terms of your infrastructure on-prem, and they'll try to match it as close as they can, but if they can't match it, you'll automatically get upgraded. The longer you're with them, the more their service gets better and better, all right? So they're in point, they have a completely DevOps model, and they are constantly updating their APIs based off of the Softlayer developer community, and they will, as they put new services out, they'll create an API. They have a philosophy is they will not develop a new service and make it available unless they have it such that it can be 100% automated for the initial configuration and the ongoing operations, and that they have the API so that you can control it, right? That is their philosophy, right? So they consider a service and an API to be completely inseparable, right? It's sort of like the chicken and the egg. They feel like, an API and a cloud service are absolutely go together. And the other thing that really made that Internet of Things demonstration happen was the Internet of Things is really going to explode the use of APIs. If you think about it, you've got these silicon chips that are embedded somewhere, and it gives you really, critical information about what it's embedded in. The only way you're really going to get that is through an API, all right? You've got to be able to, and that's going to just proliferate more and more APIs. So we really do think that, where mobile really shot up the use of APIs, that the Internet of Things is going to do the same thing, where this Internet of Things creates more and more APIs and more need. And so Softlayer, one of the things that it does is also it has APIs to the network. It has a global network so that you can control the end-to-end response time. And that's going to be very critical, especially when you try to bring mobile services and cloud services together.